So my name is Simon. I'm a third year at UChicago. I have a big development background, working in full stack at like startups and doing also data engineering at Meta and like a research project, and also have like a background in ML. So
All
I'm
of
studying.
that, but before you graduated.
Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of jobs like on campus. So I've worked 5 on-campus jobs actually, um, and I currently work at 2. But yeah, so that's like a background on me. Um, and yeah, Tim.
Yeah, Mitch, it's nice to see you again. My name is Tim Clifford. I'm a second year here at the university. I'm an economics student. I did a little work with Mitch at Blockchain Co-Investors until this new year. Since then, I've been doing some freelance work, kind of some research. Currently, I'm working with For Us All, a 401k provider, just helping them out with their kind of self-selection window and their kind of integration with blockchain tokens. Really interested in the space and super excited to have my former boss and someone I consider a mentor and friend in the space, Mitch, here today to talk with us.
Thanks. Nice to meet you, Simon. Good to see you again, Tim. Yes. So by way of background, Mitch Mechigian, living in London, currently chief of staff at Blockchain Co-Investors, the fund manager, and also CFO of Blockchain Co-Investors Acquisition Corp. One, which is a blockchain-focused SPAC. I'm so happy to go in a variety of areas, but basically I hold 2 roles. One is doing direct investments from the fund side, and we can talk about the fund in a while or subsequently. And then the other is being on the management team of this public entity, which is seeking to take a private blockchain company public. And so, I guess just a bit more on the fund. So Blockchain Co-Investors, as Tim would know, is the world's leading blockchain fund of funds. So we invest in 30 of the leading blockchain venture capital firms. So Pantera, Parify, Blockchain Capital, et cetera, 1KX. These skew, more formation seed rounds and a mix of token and equity. So early stage. And then what we do is we monitor the portfolio. So we have all this portfolio data, this connectivity in the space, and we do direct investments then into the later rounds, Series B, C, and D. And so that's a program that I really lead for the team. And we either do that via an SPV program or Angel Syndicate. We have a few pools of capital. And again, those are those growth equity rounds. And the last thing we do, which we've just started in the past fall, is we have a dedicated token fund as well. So early stage pre-mainnet launch tokens. That fund just launched in the fall, but we've already made a number of investments and the fundraising is going quite well. So that's on the fund side. On the SPAC side, so the public entity, we IPO'd a $300 million publicly traded SPAC, which is a special purpose acquisition company. And using that entity, you have an 18-month term. SPACs are a bit of a complicated financial instrument, but essentially we have 18 months to merge with a private company. So in fact, we're a public company. We're going to purchase a private blockchain company. The closing of that merger will mean that private blockchain company is now in the public markets, which we think is really important for the ecosystem and blockchain in general, and which we can talk about. And then, so anyway, that's on me. I'm happy to go into my background as well, and how I ended up here, or take it anywhere, which way you guys would like.
Yeah, I think we definitely want to talk about the fund and the SPAC. I think to start, that would be really great to just get a little context on your career, your kind of education, where you started, and kind of ultimately how you got to where you are now.
Sure. So living in London now, but kind of took a winding path to get here. I went to Washington University in St. Louis, so not far from you guys, just down the highway in St. Louis, Missouri, WashU. I studied math as a primary major, and then economics as a secondary major. So it was always very analytical and focused on that. But really my main interests are always like learning Spanish and politics and things like that. After school, after college, I had lived in New York over the summer. I'm from Oregon, so I thought it was like a foreign country. So I just wanted to do whatever I could to live in New York. And so I thought, okay, investment banking, that seems to pay enough. and that's, seems like a big job in New York. So I just focused all my effort on getting an investment banking job, and did the internship at Morgan Stanley in their capital markets division and equity capital markets. Got the offer and then returned full time. So started, right after college at Morgan Stanley, working on IPOs in their financial institutions group. So the biggest one we did was AXA Equitable, which is a multi-billion-dollar IPO. We were lead left. Really, really great experience. You learn a lot. You learn how to be professional. You learn how to be efficient. You learn about the markets. It's highly competitive. People are, super smart and dedicated. And there's something kind of invigorating about being on a team where everyone, is committed to so much that they would stay all night or work very late. So I did that for 2 years. Really enjoyed it. I mean, love the team there. But I always had this itch to move abroad, to travel, to live in different countries. So I saw within Morgan Stanley, they actually are a great company in that they like moving people around. So I had the opportunity to go either to Hong Kong or London, and both into switching out of capital markets, which capital markets is all about raising capital either via equity or debt, and I was switching into M&A, which is all about mergers, acquisitions, advising company strategies. And so I decided ultimately to go with London because I had a few friends living there, so I felt like I had it in. I had never been there when I accepted the offer, and then moved to London and did 1 year in their M&A group in real estate, which I thought was a good, complementary to the capital raising, because capital raising is very like kind of trading focused, big trading floor, fast action. We're doing block trades, deciding what to do and sell, and after the close in an hour. Very exciting. And then M&A is a lot more like long-term, massive projects, way more modeling intensive. Yeah, and so they did that for a year, and then that's when I think I just had enough of working and didn't really know which path I was going down, and I actually just quit the job, left the job after 3 years, and moved to Spain with no job, just to travel and take Spanish class for a full year. So I was traveled around, lived in Madrid, went to India, Ukraine, Egypt, a bunch of different places, and kind of just figured out what I wanted to do, and then decided I wanted to do a master's. So got into a master's at London School of Economics, International Political Economy. Yeah, and then decided I was going to use that time to read and write and learn, because I had done math and then banking, and so it was very, very analytical background, and I wanted to do something that confront kind of my weaknesses. So writing, research, thinking. So most people in the program all want to do PhDs. And they, and so through that process was thinking about, okay, what's my dissertation topic? What's my thesis topic? I'd always been interested in crypto, as an investor since 2017 in Ethereum and Bitcoin. Never sold, that's my rule in crypto is I never sell. I've never sold a token or anything. I only accumulate. That's the goal for me right now. And so I bought then, and they were doing quite well. And, that made traveling for a full year easier to stomach as crypto prices were increasing. But one of my best friends from New York, who was my roommate, is Alex Larson, who's now a GP at Blockchain Capital. And so he, I had been living together. We both got into crypto. He went to Blockchain Capital to have this amazing career, which he's now had. And I decided I'm moving to Europe. And it's funny because he's Danish, so he actually is European. And so we're really good friends. So we chat all the time, and I was chatting about dissertation topics, and he's telling me that all the things going on in DeFi and stable coins and all this stuff that had happened since I had kind of invested in 2017 and left this, mentally it left the space. It just bought and forgot about it. And so I decided I was going to write my dissertation on currency crises in Venezuela, and just completely ditch that to the side, focus my full dissertation on cryptocurrencies. Decided to go down the route of cryptocurrencies and state capacity, and their ability to threaten the state's ability to execute core functions, such as tax collection or coercion. And through that, then got connected via Alex again to Matthew Lemurley, who's a founding partner at Blockchain Co-Investors, where I now am. And then I came on part-time during the master's to conduct research for the firm. So started, in a similar position as Tim, as a, part-time kind of intern associate. And then, just had a great, basically just clicked really, really, from the start. Obviously my investment banking experience was very well suited to, the SPAC and, funds and investments. And the firm was growing a lot and wanting to make a lot of, big increases in kind of their footprint and accelerate to the next phase. So the timing was just right. And, I graduated and joined full time as chief of staff shortly after, pretty much on top of the masters at the end there. So that's where I am now. So been at the fund for over a year, and yeah, everything's super exciting, and we can happy to go in whichever direction. But it's been a bit of a winding journey. Never thought I would be in crypto, but very happy to be here now, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to kind of touch on your role or your kind of experience in investment banking. I think that's an experience that our audience here, especially our group of undergraduates here, that's an experience that is really applicable to a lot of them. So I think my first question would pretty much be how does blockchain for you, given your kind of interests in politics and political economy, how does blockchain present like a more fulfilling kind of quality of work life for yourself? Like what do you think are some elements of blockchain that make it a little bit more engaging and fulfilling than some of the work that you're potentially doing in capital markets or in M&A, if it's more fulfilling?
Yeah, no. I mean, I like finance. I like puzzles. I like math. So finance is just math, and it's just looking for efficiencies. The thing about investment banks is that it's a great business to be in, right? You go back 1,000 years, they're investment banks. 1,000 years, they're banks, right? So it's like banks are staples and the centerpiece and the tubes of the economy. So it's really awesome to get in there and work it, but they're they're conservative by design, right? So you're not going in there kind of to break up, change the way things have been done and do things on the way. There's kind of a hierarchical system. It's very well established. You're very well resourced, which is a great place to get training and learn. But it's almost as if you see kind of closed doors everywhere. And so a big difference for me is coming over to kind of a high growth tech industry. It's just the attitude and the kind of mental shift, where instead of looking at things conservatively and saying, maybe what's the downside, or, what are the regulations? Crypto is very much, let's break things and ask questions later, which has its pros and cons too. But in terms of, I do find it kind of invigorating to be around so many people who are like these eternal optimists who think that they are part of this movement that is going to make the world a better place. Like when you're at the bank, no one really thinks I'm making the world a better place. They might think I'm making the economy very efficient or something like this, which is important, but it's just kind of a different mindset. And so, particularly having done the dissertation, I think most people that we work with are believers in Bitcoin and, financial sovereignty and data sovereignty and, some of the, ideals that, of Web 1.0. And, so it's kind of invigorating to have your professional life at least somewhat align with, you think, okay, I actually do think if crypto becomes more adopted and prominent, that it actually would be better for people. Um, so that's probably the biggest difference. I don't know if I answered your question exactly.
No, I think that was excellent. So then I guess here's kind of like a follow-up question is, do you ever see yourself eventually moving on from blockchain or crypto and back to that kind of legacy financial world? Or do you believe that, at some certain point there will be, this kind of like mesh point? I think we're seeing it today kind of, with these digital banks kind of these banks receiving charters to hold digital assets, kind of like Avanti, who just converted, I think it's to Custodia now, but do you see yourself ever moving back to the legacy financial world? Or do you see yourself kind of like straddling the in between, this kind of emerging digital economy and this kind of legacy financial system?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think I would ever go back to a legacy financial institution. There's, again, I think as a young person, there's probably no better place for training to start than like a Goldman or a McKinsey or one of these kind of things. But again, you're stuck in a ladder. So, where, kind of the level that, you get to operate at a high growth or a smaller industry or something that's a little more new kid on the block is you can get moved up very quickly, and it's a lot more about performance versus it doesn't really matter how outstanding you are at McKinsey. There's a 10-year partner track, and that's the track, right? So you can hit it, and that's great. But it's very, very, pay scales are set, promotions are set. It's very, standard. So I think it would be hard for me to go back into kind of that rigid structure where, in a blockchain, because of the nature of its industry, is a lot more. There's just a lot more kind of opportunity, but with opportunity comes risk. Obviously, as you know, the trade-offs. So, pretty sure financial legacy finance will still exist, in 500 years in some regard. Maybe it'll have incorporated lots of elements of crypto. I think so. But you can definitely see a few scenarios where smaller funds or the industry has periods of struggle, and we've already had some of those periods. To be honest, I think I would rather move. I'm very, very happy where I am, and kind of the nice thing about venture capital is it kind of sits at this juxtaposition, this crossing of both. It is, in the end, it is just finance. We're raising capital, you're getting paid for that, you're deploying capital investments, they're earning a return. That's finance 101. But getting to work with the blockchain companies and do with blockchain adds this element of all those intangible things that I've been mentioning. And so it's kind of a nice balance. I would say if the only thing that I would potentially want to move on from would actually be to go further down that line and say, I'm going to join a startup or, maybe a player in the industry. I think that's kind of more appealing at this stage in my career. Having, I don't know if I would say that had I not been at Morgan Stanley, you might always think, oh, what if? But now having been inside the walls and just, the difference in excitement that you get to live your life with when, you're out there pushing for your own company, your own capital, and your own, potential, versus this kind of big 60,000 person behemoth of which you are one very, very tiny part. I think it's hard for me to go back. Would be hard.
That's an excellent answer. Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I was actually wondering, so if you mentioned that you would potentially go into a startup, since there's so many different areas of knowledge in like the blockchain space, from like law to like community building to NFTs. Is there like a specific niche that interests you? I understand you're in venture capital now, so you see a lot of different types of entities come across your table, but is there any specific topic that interests you and that you might potentially pursue in the next decade?
I mean, I'm pretty happy with venture capital because you get to take this wide view. And as Tim would know, I mean, the fund of funds model, I think, is genius in this kind of industry. Get to buy the whole basket, because it's, no one really knows how the future is going to play out. So, I like coming to it through venture capital, getting to kind of see more of an industry view, of where, if you're asking me where are there very interesting spaces in crypto, and blockchain. I mean, I think there's a lot. Like London has Aave and Nexus Mutual. These are DeFi space. I think is so fascinating and interesting, and it's building the primitives upon which I do believe that a lot of the financial system will be built. So the opportunity to go work at one of these DeFi protocols would be super, super interesting. So I think that's one that's always kind of caught my interest, is the DeFi space, just because I think it makes so much sense. And you talk about those principles of Bitcoin, like sovereign, financial ability and ability to kind of, bank yourself. If you've ever heard the podcast Bankless by the Ethereum guys, I mean, that, I think DeFi is really, really interesting for that. On top of that, I think also, some of these areas where you're really bringing crypto to widespread adoption are very interesting. So you see a lot of NFT companies now, not just making NFTs, but actually we call it picks and shovels in investing, right? So who got rich on the gold rush? It wasn't the people looking for gold, it was people building, selling shovels. And so, NFTs companies like that do white label solutions, we invested in One Infinite World. These are very, very interesting companies that are gonna, I think help bring, more widespread adoption. I think that's something that could be very exciting about working on that. The other area I'd mentioned, which, I have less of a personal interest in, but academically I'm very interested in, is gaming. So obviously play to earn is a big, big theme now. And just another area that I think it makes such a perfect, fit. If you look at the gaming community and the types of things that people are already used to doing, it's just like a perfect natural overlap for crypto, whether it's communities or in-game economies or forums or skins, aka now going to be NFTs. I mean, it's a really, really kind of natural progression, I think, of that space. Yeah, it's hard. I think, when you're in college, you have this kind of dream, I'll start a company with my friends, it'd be so fun. I think everyone probably says that at some point.
Yeah.
I think there's something, unless you're like a genius, which maybe some people are, like I think it's very difficult to do that without the necessary experience. And I think a lot of founder-led companies, at least the ones we're seeing, there are some people who are 24 and programmers, but most of the founder-led companies are people who had some experience in an area, saw a market gap, and then based on their experience in that area, we're able to fill that market gap in a very clever and adaptive way. And so there is something I would love to be in a startup, but I'm happy where I am, and I'm happy watching the space grow, and just kind of being patient to find that wait until you see that gap, rather than trying to force it, unless you really do have that novel, innovative idea.
Yeah, I definitely think yeah, I think starting a startup is in general is very, very it's so many interesting dynamics that go with that, just from what I've seen. But since we're kind of looking on the horizon, like looking to the future, I also wanted to just ask you one more question kind of in this vein, which is about the metaverse, because I feel like a lot of people have many different opinions on this, and I'm not sure if you've, encountered some, entities trying to do some sort of, gaming related metaverse project or something like that. So I was just wondering, what do you think of the metaverse in general, and is it like a viable thing that will happen? I don't know, thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, so everyone has their own opinion. I'm very opinionated on this. My opinion is we already are living in a version of the metaverse, and it's just we're going to see the acceleration of it. So to me, the metaverse is WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, Zoom. We're in the metaverse now, right? We're literally conversing over Zoom. So this idea that our social lives have moved onto the digital sphere, our professional lives have moved onto the digital sphere, our gaming lives, professional sports. I mean, everything is digitalizing and moving into, a verse within a verse, aka the metaverse. So I think this trend is only accelerating. And I mean, and it's, being against it is a bit like being against the telephone in the 1800s or something, and that's how I feel when I look at TikTok or something. I'm just like, I guess I'm the person against the telephone because I'll never use it. But I know that it's right, and it's going to only go more that way. So saying that, now what does it look like? Now I think where it's a bit interesting. So it's not about if it's happening. I think it's pretty clearly already happened and continuing to happen. Now the question is, what does it look like? Does it look like the Facebook version, the meta version, which to me is a bit dystopian, and everyone wearing, 3D glasses and walking around in parks and doing this? I mean, maybe. I hope not. I hope we're not walking around a Facebook metaverse and living, going to school inside Facebook. Does it look like, the Ethereum, what they would call the open metaverse? I hope it's more like that. But I also, I'm not exactly sold on whether or not, how much we'll dive into full digitalization, if we'll really, be using wearables and create avatars. And and we have partners, Lou Kerner, who Tim would know, he's one of the partners of the fund. Like, we're very, well versed in Decentralized and Sandbox and these types of things, and there's very, very interesting stuff come out, and it's a lot like Second Life, and there's been some iterations of this stuff before, and The Sims and stuff I used to play. But it's hard to know which direction it's going to go. But that's talking about having that desire and passion when you're working. I want to work for a more open metaverse where you can move on and off the rails, and you aren't kind of stuck in these walled technology gardens, if you don't want to be.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think this is like such a interesting thing to think about, since like, I mean, just in general in the past few decades, there's just been such like insane technological advancements. Like, I don't know, just like this is just like still like a continuation on this like exponential development on like how technology is like just changing the way that we, even experience like our lives. So yeah.
Absolutely.
So Mitch, I was hoping to get a comment from you, or kind of explanation on your thoughts with kind of mass adoption and ways that we could kind of, as kind of the blockchain community, improve kind of UI, the user kind of interface and experience as a whole. I kind of want to like call to mind like your perspective as a CFO at Blockchain Co-Investors Acquisition Corp. Bringing private blockchain companies public. So potentially, I guess calling to mind, like, I guess your experience with bringing some of these blockchain companies to the mainstream, and then also call to mind your background with economics, and perhaps, kind of aligning incentives and using some of this, theory, particularly game theory, to kind of accelerate and shore up the space a little bit, to, I guess, discourage bad actors, and then kind of, help, I guess, make people who are not necessarily comfortable in the space a little bit more secure. So a little open-ended there. Everything from, I guess, economic theory to making these blockchain companies more accessible on the day-to-day. Just, I guess, ways that you see it happening in the space, and then ways that we could continue to kind of improve in the space.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. There's a lot of ways to take it. I mean, for one, I think there is some inevitability, which I do believe in the trends of digitization and of the world's assets, whether real or digital, will only continue, and the tradability of these assets. To kind of take it in another direction away from economics, more to political economics, and my master's is, probably the biggest risk that most funds underwriting right now is political risk, regulatory risk. So, a lot of what we say, what will adoption look like, is actually going to be formed in political decisions and institutional decisions at these regulatory agencies. And so that's why, when you talk about taking blockchain companies public, I think it actually is really, really important for the industry to embrace kind of the mainstream and not be always so, kind of not always hold this outsider kind of anti everything role. And I think the industry has already started to move, a lot more towards that embrace, because as more companies go public, right, then we have public shareholders. As more, Americans and people on their own hold stocks in these public companies, as these public blockchain companies start to deal and interact with other blockchain companies and the SEC and the CFTC, and FINRA, and these types of things, it just meshes crypto and blockchain more into the real economy, into the social fabric. And that creates this, because of our political institutional framework in the US, as a liberal representative democracy with strong rule of law, that creates an interest class, an interest that will support the blockchain industry. And so that's one of the great strengths of the US, in my opinion, for the blockchain industry, is that you have the political constituents already. 50% of people under the age of 40 own crypto. As more of these companies go public, you're gonna have more of the elites and regulatory agencies interacting and dealing with crypto and learning about it. So when you get these pushes to ban crypto, to create these incredibly strong regulatory moats around it, you've created this interest-based system and interest bargaining that happens in this process. to push and create a regulatory framework, and there absolutely should be a regulatory framework, but one that makes sense, leaves the industry competitive, while also upholding some of these goals, legitimate social political goals of whichever administration is overseeing the implementation of these regulations. So for me, I think having public, I think having Coinbase IPO or direct listing, is a seminal moment for the industry and really, really important. It creates legitimacy. My dad, he doesn't know anything about crypto other than I work at Blockchain Co-Investors. And so he asked me, well, where should I invest? I mean, now I can point, say, Coinbase, this is a publicly traded company with audited financials, and this is legitimate. I can say that. And so having more of that, I think, is good, and it just makes it seem less foreign and more kind of normalized. And so that, I think, will be one of the biggest roadblocks, because I think ideally you're going to have a lot of people using crypto and blockchain rails without really noticing it, paying for things in the future with stable coins, having maybe savings accounts that are getting their interest, from on-chain DeFi yields. So I think people are going to start to interact with crypto in more ways than we think. But talk about how can I help accelerate it? I think your astute point, Tim, that more public companies for the industry will be good. And then just like how the internet, there used to be internet funds, there used to be internet companies. I mean, internet was a true horizontal. Now every company, you can't be a company and not be an internet company. And I think in a lot of ways blockchain will follow a similar trajectory. Assuming, like with the internet, the regulation doesn't prevent it, because I think, again, looking back from a political economy perspective, you have seen many countries very antagonistic towards crypto. Most notably China with the mining ban, and really a ban on all financial institutions dealing with cryptocurrencies. And so that in that country, again, looking at the political institutional framework, they don't have those same capacity for that interest bargaining to occur with the strong rule of law. So I think, at least in the U.S., it's important that we move quickly to kind of normalize this, and create those bases of societal support.
Excellent. To follow up, my question would be, where do you see central bank digital currencies kind of fitting into this landscape? I know you mentioned China. I know they rolled out the digital yuan this year. While that doesn't exactly use blockchain technology, it's a little more centralized. What do you think the United States and the United Kingdom alike could be doing, and what do you hope to see them doing in 2022 to kind of, welcome and accept and begin to use some kind of blockchain technology? And do you think that CBDCs will ultimately be something that's a net positive for the space? I think regulation in the long term is always going to be a good thing, but what do you think the role of these kind of digital currencies? What role do you think they will ultimately come to play?
That's another great question. I mean, look, this really depends on a number of factors. I would say on its face, CBDCs are almost the antithesis of cryptocurrency to me. You're talking, it's true centralization of money. And so taken to its, most logically negative view, as I would say with the digital yuan, is, total surveillance, ability to turn on and off, accounts and transactions, ability to block what you can pay for. So that, if you compare that to Bitcoin, it's essentially, the antithesis of it. That being said, if you look at maybe some other countries that are thinking about developing the CBDC, the question to ask is, are they trying to preserve the inherent features of cash? And so what are the inherent features of cash? Anonymity, essentially ability to engage in off-market or informal transactions, right? So I can just hand you a $5 bill, Tim. If we had a CBDC in the US, FedCoin, would I be able to just send you $5, or would that now need to be a reported transaction somewhere? Things like this. Are we preserving cash? And I think so far the Fed has said that if they were to create a CBDC, they would preserve cash. But then they also add in that they want to take deeper dives at incorporating AML, anti-money laundering, and KYC, your customer, into intrinsically into the money, which starts to become very problematic in my view. So overall, I hope that it is my hope and belief that Bitcoin will accelerate, and Ethereum and some of these other notable coins to a place such that they're reputable enough that they're accepted for payments at many locations, and stable enough such that we could use them maybe in conjunction with the CBDC, which a CBDC obviously would allow for other areas of efficiency. But having the CBDC sort of replace stable coins as a means of payment, private stable coins as a means of payment, is very troublesome for me.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think that especially with what China is doing, it's going to be extremely interesting. I feel like there's kind of this like free market versus centrally backed showdown, so to speak. And I know you referenced bankless earlier, and that's something that that's a theme that they regularly touch on. So I think 2022 is going to be an exciting year to watch as everything kind of develops in that space.
Yeah, and I definitely think, because of, this space is so fast moving and there's always so many new people getting into it. I was wondering, just for, like the people that would be watching this are undergrads at our school. So just what would you recommend to someone like kind of like an undergraduate kind of level that's trying to get into the space? And so, yeah, what would you recommend, to someone trying to get in? Especially with like a non-technical background, someone that doesn't like really know too much about coding or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. One, I would just say there's tons of opportunity right now. So, I think the main thing is following genuine interests, because that's where it makes, doing the so-called work easy and fun. So if you have a genuine interest in something like DeFi, watching YouTube videos from Finematics, which is essentially how I learned everything I needed to learn for my dissertation, that becomes easy. It becomes fun. And so, if you can find those things that you're genuinely interested in, then your base of knowledge will just kind of compound, right? Rather than, then when you get to your interview, rather than having to cram for 3 days on what is blockchain, it's like you already know all the answers because you're reading CoinDesk and you're on crypto Twitter, and you just kind of like are through osmosis accumulating the knowledge that's needed for these things. So that's how I would like level set everything. The other thing is just it's still just like any other industry that we're all humans, and it's all about network and connectivity. So ask people for coffee chats, chat, don't be afraid to message people on Twitter or LinkedIn, to chat, maybe go to a few conferences, just start getting around people and getting used to putting yourself out there. Because that's in the end is that once you get inside any company, you realize that none of the jobs are absolute rocket science, and everyone's kind of making it up as they go along. But it's about getting in and being in the right position at the right time and meeting the right people. That's how you get into get into a lot of the companies. So those are not super tangible. But I think if you do those two things, if you follow your genuine interests, and then you're just always out putting yourself out there, talking to people, setting up calls, asking people for, if I was an undergrad and, I'm a sophomore or a freshman, I mean, you have tons of time to do, an internship. You can do it. Tim did, he did part-time at Blockchain Co-Investors, probably didn't know much about blockchain before, but, next time he goes apply somewhere, he'll have something to talk about related to blockchain if he's interested in working in it. And so you can kind of just, lots of places would love to have someone part-time for a little bit, or have a call. So if I was a sophomore or junior out and I was very interested, I would just find that subsector or subcategory of blockchain that's doesn't feel like work when I'm learning about it, and just kind of follow that naturally to its conclusion, and then pair that with a sustained effort of getting in front of people, which is very, very difficult actually to get moving on that front, because you get a lot of inertia with those, like how, the first email you send to someone will be the hardest, or the first coffee chat. But then if you get in the flow of it and you're doing one every 2 weeks, then it's not a big deal at all. So if you can get into that flow, then it, I think will just happen naturally.
Yeah, that's great. Just following up on that real quick, and we're just gonna do this one follow-up question, and we have like one like audience question, and so then we'll be wrapping up. But yeah, so just following up, I guess, since you've been in the space for a while now, is there, knowing what you know now, is there any like advice or tip that you would have given yourself before moving into the space, or not at all?
Sorry, you can say that again? I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so I was wondering, since you're like have been in the space for a while now, I was wondering, knowing what you know now, is there any like advice or tip that you would give to yourself before getting into the space? And it's okay if there isn't anything.
No, of course. I mean, I'm just
Yeah,
trying to narrow it down to one.
Yeah.
I mean, besides buy more,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I still and continue to underestimate the power of being weird and being nerdy. I used to be very into games, and then gaming, and kind of just fell out of it, and now that feels like an asset. And I think I have friends and colleagues who are like into these weird subcultures and internet things, and being really into something like that is actually like a massive asset. And that's kind of why I said to everyone to follow that genuine category, because if you're like really involved in like board game subreddit, and you're like a person on the board game subreddit, I mean, now with tokenization and token economics, I mean, there's actually real value to be captured in that role, which previously was something people just kind of did for fun because they were weird in the best way. And so I think by listening to external forces and trying to optimize myself for the so-called workforce, I de-emphasize some of these other weird passions that I had. Obviously still have some, but I think that's something I wish if I had stayed from being 13 and being very into Call of Duty and continued on those paths. It would just kind of create an interesting dynamic now. I don't know if that was the answer you're expecting, but
No, I think that was really great. It's definitely like very an important thing to consider.
and the other advice is just don't worry so much.
Yeah,
It'll all work out. No, just don't even worry. You're just the sun's gonna rise and set.
Sounds good. So I guess we have one audience question from a person named Luke. So Luke is asking, since looking at the portfolio at the blockchain coin investors, it's a pretty amazing portfolio. So Luke is wondering, what kind of things like really stand out to you when you are talking to one of these projects, and what like kind of draws, like what are the green flags per se?
Maybe rephrase to the early stage token fund into the co-investment program. But yeah, Mitch, what kind of like due diligence are you doing kind of on the daily?
So I think in early stage investing, and even in mid stage for the co-investment program, I think management team and people are still going to be, the key focus for lots of investors and for us. So and having founders who are friends now, it's like you need someone who's just tenacious, who is willing to just push, who, you'd love to see someone who is also willing to pivot and change and adapt quickly. And like, that's what I meant about adapting to those markets. So maybe it's someone who started 3 ideas and they keep changing their idea, but trying to find the one that sticks. And so you find these, for the early stage in particular, I'm like an early stage token fund, like someone with that history of starting projects that then they can shift quickly and find a market fit. As you get later in the stage, you like to see other categories or attributes for management teams, particularly as they look to go public. So what I'm looking at for a SPAC management team is very different than an early stage token fund. Whereas the SPAC, you'd like to see other public company management experience, or if they're CFO, maybe PwC or another audit firm experience. But I think at its core, it still comes down to people and having that right team to pick. There's obviously all the other areas, which is, thematic industry areas. Is this an industry you think is a good one to invest in? What's their competitive moat? How are they tracking their KPIs and monitoring that, and what sort of metrics do they need to hit for this to make sense? Those all come in, but if you don't start with the people and the management team, I think it's I think you're best served to start with the people and the management.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I think that'll probably be our final question for you today, but I just want to kind of remind our audience here that Blockchain Co-Investors has a number of excellent resources on their website. Fifth Era Media as well on YouTube is an excellent resource if you just want to get a little more familiar and acquainted with the work that they're doing. They put out great content, so yeah, feel free to check that out. But Mitch, thank you so much for an incredible conversation. I thought your perspective was amazing. We'd love to have you back and continue our discussions in the future. Yeah, Simon.
Yeah. Also, if there's like anything you'd like to plug, like if you have a Twitter or your LinkedIn, yeah, feel free to plug it. We can put it in the description. So yeah, if you have
I feel
any,
like
also
I'm
any
on
like
the end
last
of
words. Yeah.
I feel like I'm on the end of Hot Ones.
Yeah,
You ever
that
watch
yeah,
Hot
yeah,
Ones? Exactly.
yeah. That
Like,
we're
look
trying
at
to
the
move towards
camera.
that somehow.
I mean, nothing to plug. I'm actually pretty reserved on social media, so I don't want anyone random following me. Thank you very much. No, just kidding. But no, yeah, head to blockchaincoinvestors.com. I do webinars, so I guess I'll plug my webinars. I've done one, What is DeFi? I've done one on SPACs. And I'll have a forthcoming one on NFTs and play to earn. So if you're interested in kind of like a primer, bird's eye view, what these are, very simple, 20 minutes before you head to, deeper down the YouTube rabbit hole, you can check out there. I think it's blockchaincoinvestors.com/webinars.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
guys.
Yeah,
Thank you so much
for
for
your
having me.
time. Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
guys.
Mitch.
Thank you.